Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Would everybody please rise for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence, and please keep in your thoughts the family, the friends, Ralph Montgomery, who is in hospice right now. He's one of the longtime benefactors of the city and one of the founders of Action 2000. Thank you. Dan, please call the roll.
Mayor Kennedy. Here. Commissioner Lavelle.
Here.
Commissioner Hanna.
Here.
Commissioner Hooknagel.
Here.
Mayor Johnson.
Here. And I need to remind anybody who's going to stand up and speak before the commission tonight that they need to state their name, address, or record. Okay, the first agenda item is a report of the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Corporal Katzer of Pinellas County Sheriff's Office. Going over the stuff for this month, we got hit pretty good with car burglaries. The major area was up around Harbor Drive north and south. However, they also hit over in Squad 3 as well. We identified and arrested the suspects, and as you guys probably well aware of, the burglaries have dropped off. All the burglaries were all unlocked vehicles, and there was no forced entry in any of them. As far as arrests, we had one arrest for a city ordinance violation, one for possession of controlled substance, one for tampering with a witness. We had 2 domestic related batteries, possession of a controlled substance, paraphernalia, and a warrant arrest. The other was 2 DUIs in the city. So most of those people passing through. There was a total of 274 traffic stops within the city of the last month. We did like I said, 17 burglaries. We were called out to 16 suspicious vehicles. We found 12 open doors or windows at different locations, whether that's a garage door or an open door to a residence. We responded to 11 noise complaints. This time, we haven't had a lot of dealings with 1800 Rocks lately. They've been keeping everything pretty quiet. This last month, we've been dealing with Airbnbs. And most of those are called in by an anonymous complainant. And when we get out there, either they comply and turn the noise down, or it's already quiet when we get out there. So it's kind of hard for us to follow up when there's no complaint. Other than that, we had a couple frauds, which are at the businesses, some retail thefts, and we had one crash within the city. Actually, I'm sorry, there was. It looks like 20 crashes or so. Most of them were in the 300 block of Fifth Avenue. So that's about it.
Well, thank you very much. Are there any questions, Phil?
Recovered property, when you finally caught the suspects, did we ever recover any of the property?
As far as I know, no property was recovered.
Okay.
When we caught them, they were actually in another area on a different date.
Okay.
We noticed them. There's a couple houses that have surveillance video, so we knew kind of who we were looking for after we got the surveillance video. And like I said, they hit the same areas a couple different times. They hit Indian Rocks 2 nights in a row. They hit Squad 3 in the same areas. And then it was after that second night over in Squad 3, we ended up, a deputy was driving through the neighborhood, saw the vehicle, they fled, ended up going all the way into Squad 7, which is up in North County. And they ended up tracking with a canine, they caught a couple of the guys there. Then the very next night, we caught them down in Pasadena. And it was, one of the kids was the same kid from the night before. So we know it's the same group of kids, and since we've arrested all of them, like I said, it's dropped off. We don't have them coming through the neighborhoods. Plus, I know on our shift, my guys have been sitting back in the neighborhood, making sure that they patrol back there. And then instead of 2 going out on the beach, which is what we were doing before, and that's when we were getting hit, was usually when they're out on the beach. So I'm sending 1 out on the beach and the other one staying back in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Anybody else have a question? Is there any member of the audience who has a question for the sheriff's department?
I was wondering, on the contrary, you said you don't believe that they were recovered.
As far as I know, they have not been recovered.
Well, congratulations on catching people. The thing that, this same thing happened 2 years ago with some of my friends on South Harbor. And I was surprised to learn that no police came around knocking on doors asking if we had surveillance cameras. And again, when this happened and handguns were stolen, nobody came knocking on doors up and down South Harbor, because, you know, to get on there, you gotta go by all the houses.
Actually, sir, we knocked on several doors and got no answers to several.
I don't doubt that there's some people.
We actually walked up and down, and that's how we found several vehicles that had been burglarized, was because we walked up and down checking the vehicles as we also, we look on the houses to see if there's any, video cameras that would be able to catch it.
Okay.
Just a question, there were 20 crashes on 3rd Street, 20?
No, that's throughout the whole month. There was only 11, what is showing here.
It only showed 1 on our sheet.
What's down on 3rd?
Maybe that's the total for the year.
What's the total for there?
Yeah, here today.
It doesn't specify on my sheet, it
Oh,
just
okay.
shows 11.
Oh,
That's probably year to date.
Bill, did you have something?
Yeah, when you say they were the ones that had possession of illegal or whatever, does that mean that they weren't selling it, or was that something just?
No, they weren't selling, they just had it.
Okay. But what do you call it if they sell it or something like that?
Well, it would be a different charge, it would be distribution.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else have a question at this point?
Well, I just want to make a comment. My boyfriend's car, he had lights stolen out of his car in my driveway around the same time they were doing the breaking into the cars. Of course, you can't lock a light, but I just thought I'd let you know that.
Okay, where do you?
420 Harbor Drive South.
Okay. Yeah, they hit Harbor Drive South the one night and they came back the next night.
I have floodlights. You come near my house and those lights go on, so they must have been awfully bright.
Yeah.
I mean, to pull his headlight out.
It actually had them on video. They were walking down the middle of the street, and all they do is they run up in the driveway and check door handles, and they keep going.
Well, they took his light. They're pulling it out of the socket, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, okay, if there's nothing else up here, thank you very much. Sure appreciate it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is the presentation, FDOT State Road 699, Gulf Boulevard and Park Boulevard to Walsingham Road Project.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
My name's John Novak. I'm the project manager, engineer of record for the job with Protean Design Group. With me tonight are Tim O'Brien. He's the senior project manager. He represents DOT. And also Brian Pickard. Pickard is the director of the operations center for Pinellas County, maintenance and construction over there in Ulmer. That's correct. I don't know your title. You're close enough. Okay. We're here to talk about the drainage project that we're doing on Gulf Boulevard, and it starts down at Park Boulevard in Indian Shores and runs up to Walsingham. Next slide, please. The limits, as I said, it's a 3-mile job from Park Boulevard to Walsingham, and it's a 2-lane road, 10-foot wide lanes, and then we have 5-foot bike and a 5-foot pedestrian path on both sides of the road. That's the shoulders of the road. The stormwater runs off into there's some drainage inlets out there, and the rest of it is picked up by the pervious pavement that is put into the shoulder. The runoff infiltrates into the pedestrian, into the shoulder, and is carried or percolates into the ground. Usually, except I guess the cyclists and walkers know that it doesn't always happen that way right now. But what we did, next slide please, we want to improve the drainage along the pathway, and there's a shot of showing, you know, kind of how bad, and it also spreads out into the roadway, which is again a problem for traffic too, that water. But what we're going to do is attempt to limit the volume of water standing on the pathway after the storm events. And we're looking, what we did, after a 1/3 of an inch of rain, we went out there and at 0 hour, 1 hour afterwards, 2 hours, 4 hours, and 24 hours after the rain event, we went and took a video of the roadway in both directions, and then had those videos. The CAD people looked at the videos, and they plotted where the water was ponding, the limits of the water. So we try to come up with a practical solution to it. So we looked and found, you know, discuss it with the DOT, what we're going to, you know, kind of keep it economical within limits, but also make it a viable project. So we went and said, okay, in 2 hours, we want to find we want to make the pathway passable by both bicycle and pedestrians, meaning that we're going to get a 3-foot pathway down down the shoulders for each side. So that's what we did, and you know, you could see where you know, to accomplish that. Next slide, please. We're installing primarily trench drains along the area, and there's a kind of a sample that was photoshopped into a section of a photo, but there's a lot of them that were put in 2 years ago. I had a project, and they were doing the trench drains down in Treasure Island. They did it. So we're putting in basically 2,000 feet of trench drain, and which requires 15,000 feet of pipe. So that's basically 3 miles of pipe we're putting in through in Indian Shores and Indian Rocks Beach. We coordinated with your project, your undergrounding project. We met with here a couple of times with CPWG. We also saw their permit submittal that we did and reviewed to ensure that there weren't any conflicts. We're also coordinating a lot with the other utilities, Clearwater Gas, Duke, Bright House, you know, and Pinellas County Water and Sewer to, you know, get the utility adjustments done so we could put our pipes in. We did approximately 800 test holes, the SUE holes out there, to locate the laterals and the pipes that might be in conflict with our work. One of the other items we're doing is we're going to replace all the asphalt, the whole 10-foot shoulder. We'll mill off the surface and put in new asphalt along that road. The most important thing, again, is to keep it safe and also minimize impacts to the residents and motorists. So during that process, we will maintain all access to public and private property. We're going to maintain 2-way traffic throughout the project. We'll be shifting traffic away from the work zones 5 feet away, so the contractor will have a work area to work on one side of the road, and we'll allow him to have multiple work zones along the road, but they have to be within like a ½ mile apart and also on the same direction of traffic. So they may have several going on to expedite the project. There is one case, and it won't affect the Indian Rocks Beach. We have 2 pipe crossings in Indian Shores that we have to actually shut down the road down to 1 lane so we could trench across the road and build that, but that won't impact you. We have The limited work area at the time is from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And at that time, then everything has to be cleared out and safed up and completed for the work for that day. The contractor may approach you all to maybe get some relief in certain areas, maybe extend that, or maybe for that, I don't know if they want to go for overnight work or something to do that other trench across, but again, that'll be anything other than 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. would have to be come to the commission. The roadway will be open overnight, weekends and holidays, and we will be maintaining pedestrian traffic on one side of the road. Bicycles at this time will have to share the traffic lane with the people. There's no way around that, so, or else use the side of the pedestrian path there too. And all crossings will be done at the flashing beacons to get the people safely across the road from one side to the other. Schedule on this job, it's scheduled to be let in May of this year. Looks like we anticipate construction would start in July or August of the summertime. And we're looking at an approximate duration of 12 months, and that could be impacted positively if the contractor does multiple work zones, or not. It could be impacted negatively if there's some problems with the utilities that come up or anything that we have to relocate. But we did take into consideration spring break and holidays, so the work will be during the week. And also, the estimated cost we have right now is $3.2 million for this. Next slide. As I mentioned, the contact for this job is Tim O'Brien at the DOT, so his number and email is up there. And if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer or try to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Taking questions up here?
This is a great project. I'm really supporting it. Question is the maintenance of the drains. Do we have to pump them out once they're under the ground? Or
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
They're
They're
filled with sand.
the trench drains will be piped with, 8-inch PVC pipe into existing drainage inlets that have outfalls.
So the water collection system is going to take the water that comes
Correct.
Okay, so
The rest of it also will be, there's several areas where we're using kind of a sump drain. It'll have it's an inlet with piping and perforated pipe, and that'll, because it was too far to run piping to an inlet, so we have some sump drains also that will,
we'll have to
seed.
pump those out every couple
No, shouldn't have to pump those out. The one thing we will have to do, and the DOT will maintain the trench drains, because they'll silt up. And, so they will come out on a regular basis, correct them, and we purposely went in, and where the length of pipes that we have in between trench drains has been minimized such that they can easily clean, usually with a hose, they jet out any of the silt that builds up in there. So we kept our less than 100 feet such that they can easily maintain the trench drains.
You said the DOT is to do that, so the cities don't have to maintain the drains. Okay, great. Thank you.
You got it?
So that'll drain into the intercoastal then?
Yes.
Cookie?
We did the grading of the bike lanes for pedestrians and the bicyclists. How will that affect those lanes that we have done? I work on Fort Pinellas and work with the FDOT, so I'm just curious because we've done that throughout Goff Boulevard.
Right. I don't think our work now does not impact any of the work that's been done so far. In fact, we're adding 2 areas of the green special emphasis pavement
Right.
At 3rd northbound on 3rd Avenue and 4th Avenue at Los Mexicanos and at Krabby Bill's, because of the parking situation where the cars back in and pull in and back out. So we put in, we're proposed to put in the high special emphasis green markings in those areas.
And of course, that'll be after you're done
Well,
with the.
yeah, that'll be the final step. After we do the drainage work and all the, trenching is done and the inlets are done, then we'll come back, mill off the top layer of asphalt and
Right.
replace it with all new asphalt.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm glad you're going to be putting those there because in our original drawings, we did not have them there. So I'm glad you're going to. Thank you.
Billy, So is this going to be, how is this coordinated time-wise with our own undergrounding? I mean, we're not tearing up areas twice, are we, or pretty much, or how's this going to, is there any chance that?
We're either gonna be right in front of them or right behind them.
Right in front or right behind?
Our anticipation is to move in front of them, so we're not gonna be restoring asphalt base and having them come back and take it out.
All right, that makes sense.
That's our plan.
Pretty much the operation you're doing there is the directional bore.
Right.
So it impacts small areas.
Right, right.
You know, so.
Relatively small areas.
Right, and, you know, I would assume if it's going concurrently with the drainage project, the drainage project contractor would probably elect to work other areas, and then hopefully that'll work, because then, after your guys are done, he could come back and work in that area and then do all the asphalt work, finish it up, so it's, you know, not patchwork after that.
Just, were any of you on the original project
Original,
of what they did in between Walsingham and Park Boulevard? When you put in the pervious and all that?
I wasn't.
Okay.
No.
We're very happy you're fixing that.
Yeah, that, I would say that it's, in Indian Rocks Beach, there hasn't been too many drainage problems. We have a few areas, but in Indian Shores, it's been much more noticeable in that stretch.
Yeah,
You drive down,
we
sorry.
heard.
So,
An
but
hour ago, we heard.
I'm sure. So it's all good that it's being tackled and trying to be improved, so appreciate that. So, anything else up here, Greg? Thank you very much. Sure
I don't know
appreciate
if
it.
any of the citizens or, you know.
Anybody from the audience have any questions?
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I got one. It has nothing to do with underground utilities?
No, this one doesn't, no.
Okay.
Only the utilities that are, you know, some of the laterals like gas or sewer or water that are in conflict with our drainage system, those will be relocated or worked out, but not any major underground.
I was driving into, my name's Jim Palomaro, 102 15th Avenue. I was driving Indian Shores this morning. We had rain last night, flooded. Especially in the condos that always water their plants. And it's this much higher than the road.
Yeah,
And it all goes into the bike and the pedestrian.
yes,
And it's a failure. It's a failure.
right, that's why we're putting in.
So, are you fixing a failure now?
Yes, that's what the trench drains, like I said, we located the areas of ponding. There's almost 180 of them within this 3-mile stretch. We're putting in trench drains there, and then also with the replacing all the asphalt along the top, it'll improve the pervious.
We were the first to do pervious on our beach accesses in probably the state of Florida, so we know about that. But, long run, curbs and sidewalks and real drainage won't help.
Well, that is very expensive. You're right, a very expensive proposition. Probably when it was looked at 10 or 12 years ago, it was over 30 million. I'm sure that'll be much higher now. And also, that didn't include the right-of-way cost. And when you look at any impacts, to put in sidewalk, we're going to have to grade the road, everything right, and to tie back in, that means we're going to take property away from private, but worse than that is businesses, because business damages add up a lot.
It's to a minimum now, though. You got almost the footage you need.
Right, yeah, we're staying within the right-of-way, no right-of-way. It's a tight right-of-way, 40 feet. You got, 10-foot shoulders and 10-foot lanes, that's the 40 feet. You're back up against
Thank
it.
you.
Okay.
I just have one question about your trench drains, the covers on those.
They're safe for bicycles and pedestrians.
I want my rims to go to get bent.
Okay, thank you, we sure appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item, which is public comments. If anybody wants to speak before the commission on a topic that's not on the agenda for up to 3 minutes, please come forward and state your name and address.
Can I say it's been good working with Dean? And he didn't
Yes.
pay me to say that.
Good working with Dean.
He's good.
Could you fix the light bulb?
I'm Gordon Obarski. I live at 708 Beach Trail, number B. I just want to commend the city and the commission for what you've done with the softball field. That place is awesome. It gives a bunch of us old guys an opportunity to go out there and run around and sweat. We have a great time out there, and I just want to say thanks, and I appreciate it, and Happy New Year to everybody that's on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
Good evening.
Evening.
Bob Griffin, 375 La Hacienda. As you can tell, I have a cold. I just came to wrap up the Christmas card program I've been involved with for the last 2 years. It grew from 35 cards this year to last year to over 50 this year. We had 50 when Greg Mims asked me to kind of cap it at 50. This year we had to store a few off-center, off-site. Fortunately, some of the participating merchants said they could handle theirs. So we've pretty much maxed out on the number of cards we're going to have. Reflecting back, I've never known a project in this town to involve so many different groups. And it's not just the organizations like A2K or homeowners. I mean, we've got citizens that lived on streets or people that worked at the post office that just bought one of these Christmas cards and had them developed and worked with. Not all of them were designed by outside people. We have many people that want to design their own or get a friend to design it for them. And it was kind of interesting how the project came together. And those that didn't have artists, I was able to help them find an artist that would work within our budgets. Actually, there's almost $20,000 invested in this project, and it's a break-even project. I certainly didn't make a penny on it. Maybe I lost some money. But I'd like to thank the city for helping us. It's sort of a repeat of what existed 35 years ago, but of course it's got a different presentation. It wasn't meant to look like the ones that we had 35 years ago. I've received personally nothing but favorable comments about what we did from all levels of people. One of the things that caught my eye as I was driving around, and I saw numerous people stopping and taking photographs, maybe standing next to it. People that weren't associated with the cards at all, they just wanted to stand next to a palm tree or a Santa Claus or something like that. And I don't know where those photographs went, but probably to somebody's Facebook. It's kind of similar to what Clearwater did a few years ago with the dolphins. They got merchants to pay for dolphins, they had them painted, and millions of impressions went elsewhere through Facebook and social media. So I don't know if we had millions, but we certainly had dozens of people taking photographs of these billboards. I'm going to give Deanne a copy of the list of participating stores. And I'd like to thank Brian, who did a nice front page story for us. Where was you, Brian? Oh, Tom. Tom did it. The Beach Bee, our newsletter. I think one TV station came on and did it. So we got a lot of favorable publicity on this. I'll get with the city team next year, and any crinkles we had, we can work out. I think I understood the rules. I had a few merchants that didn't, but as we roll around October, November next year, you and I will get together. I want to give this list to Deanne for the record. This is the list of all the participating.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate you spearheading the program.
Sure.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak this time?
Go ahead.
Don House, 2104 Beach Trail. So as a candidate for mayor commissioner, I hope this is one of my last times on this side of the podium. We'll see. Having fun anyway. Y'all got accolades tonight, which doesn't happen a lot, but that's good because 90% of what you do, we usually agree with. And but a few meetings ago, I was up here really saying, please sell the sewer system, please sell it. And I thought it was a great idea that you sold it. But one of the things that I said was, when you sell it, put it into a what-if fund. And y'all did. Y'all put it in a what if we spend all of it, what do we do then? And that's why there's a couple of initiatives on the ballot about what to do with the sewer reserves. And y'all want to move it to the general fund. I don't think it needs to be moved in the general fund. I think it needs to be saved. I think it needs to be banked. The funds, you got a couple of projects went sideways or upside down or over budget, but we don't need to spend that money. We need to save it. And 70% of people get
Thank you.
John Fansteel, 448 Harbor Drive South. I want to thank Greg and also the commissioners. I was here at the last meeting, but I was able to watch it on the video, so that's been a long time coming, and I really appreciate it. Following up on what I said before about the theft of the handguns, we know those handguns are not going to private collectors. They're going to people that are going to use them to murder a human being or do armed robbery. And we have cases where I think there was a police officer and 2 kids and a wife that was shot with a gun that was stolen out of a car in Tampa. I certainly don't want to see. It's heartbreaking to hear about things like that, or some kid working overtime at a 7-Eleven. So I think this is an extremely serious crime. And I know myself and none of my neighbors that are around me were asked if we had video footage of it. And that has to be done immediately, because oftentimes these things are only schooling for 24 or 48 hours. So I would request that the commission look at something else, the charts that are about how many traffic accidents and all that kind of stuff. They're really pretty. But I think what would be better is to ask for a reckoning of how many serious crimes have arrests or property returned. That is the way to judge it. I know a lot of these police officers would like to do investigative work as opposed to just sitting in a car and writing out reports on things. I mean, that's why a lot of them got into this, was because they want to catch the bad guys, and I think they need direction from the commission or from the city manager that you want to see how many crimes, important crimes, are solved. And also, and whenever there's an important crime, that they walk door to door for all the areas into that neighborhood to see if there's surveillance video, so it can get taken care of. I mean, it's just crazy that this happened on one night and they came back to the same neighborhood on the second night. I don't think that would have happened if everybody was alerted to this. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak this time?
John Thayer, 1819 Bay Boulevard. In response to the car plant, how about the residents take a little responsibility, lock their cars and don't keep handguns in them, and none of this would ever happen. Thank you. They're all unlocked cars.
That's true. Thank you. Is there anything else who would like to speak this time? Okay, then let's move on to reports of the city attorney. Reginald?
Randy Moore, City Attorney here, reporting that it is the beginning of 2018 and we are working, my office is working closely with city staff to handle a number of priorities. We look at ordinances, one of which tonight we're discussing short-term rentals. Some other things we've been looking at, revisions to the code that are necessary either based on legislative action in Tallahassee or Supreme Court opinions in the past few years. Constantly looking for opportunities to make sure your code is valid and also modern. And so we're working with city staff this year to do that, and that's all I have to add at this point. You'll be seeing those things in the coming months as we go through them and slate them for proper business.
Thank you. Any questions up here for the city attorney? All right, thank you. We'll move on to report of the city manager.
Thank you. Now, a very brief report tonight. Today is National Law Enforcement Day, by the way. And I want to thank the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office for the great work that they do, and a lot of things that they do that the public never knows about, whether it's undercover work. And I particularly want to thank Captain Mike Liner. I think at different times y'all have had the opportunity to meet with the captain or talk to the captain about issues, and he's just an awesome individual. In fact, my only concern about him, he's one of those folks that's risen to the top, and I'm afraid the sheriff's going to move him somewhere else. But I want to particularly recognize Captain Liner for all the good things that he does for us. One of the things that I talked to Captain Leiter today, we meet frequently, and I want to announce the commission to the public. And we'll actually list this on the agenda packet when it goes out, just to remind the public that from the next meeting forward, at 6:45, before every meeting, there will be a deputy or deputies here that will be available to meet with the public. And just like the coffee with the cop, it's just another opportunity that somebody needs to speak privately or speak with a deputy, they'll have opportunities. So there'll be deputy or deputies here every meeting at 6:45 to 7 to talk to the public before the meeting. So that's a good thing. We found out today, back in 2013, we started the process of converting all the street lights to LED. We did Gulf Boulevard first, and then we wanted to get that project done, let the public get adjusted to the LED lights. And they are different, and the lighting on that's different. And back last summer, I reported to the commission that we signed the necessary paperwork for Duke to retrofit all the LED light, all the existing street lights in all the residential areas. And we found out today they're going to start that on January the 28th, and believe it or not, they say they'll have that done in a week. So once they have that finished, the only two areas we'll have left that we'll follow up on will be the Narrows Business District, and like down here at the Nature Preserve, we have the pedestal lights. That'll be the last remaining areas in the city where we'll have all LED. And the last thing I report is we talked about this during the budget process. It's a good allocation of our money, by the way, is we installed our first solar powered pedestrian lights at a beach access on the north end of town, where we put out all the wire fixtures and put in. We're gonna leave those. We're not going to do any more immediately. We're going to leave those in for a short period of time, make sure that we don't have any technical issues. We don't think we will. And then once that short time period passes, then there's also money set aside. We're spending your money the right way to go from access to access, to put in solar powered pedestrian lights at all the beach accesses. So we've started that. And that's all I have. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Any questions up here from the city manager? Okay, appreciate it. All right, let's move on to reports of the city commission. We'll start off with Cookie.
Happy New Year.
Happy
I
New
just
Year.
wanted to mention to the commission, I went to a meeting with Pinellas County, and it was about sea level is real. And basically what it was talking about is the challenges that we are dealing with and the wake-up call that we had with Hurricane Irma. And we're going to investigate. I took a lot of notes on it so that in the future we had a lot of businesses who suffered damages through the storm, several in Indian Rocks Beach. So I'm hoping that once we put together some kind of a program that we can get together with our businesses and kind of talk about how we move forward in the future concerning hurricanes and what we can do to better serve our citizens and also the business community. We did a really good job when we had Hurricane Irma and the aftermath, and so I think that we can communicate and move forward with that. So that's why I went to this, and there were a lot of PhDs there who talked about some of the things that they have been doing in South Florida. So I was very impressed with it, and once I get a program together, I'll share it with you. So I just wanted to tell you about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Bill.
Happy New Year. I was, as you know, I rode with Calvin today up and down Gulf Boulevard looking at the accesses and also pulling out of the streets on Gulf Boulevard where it's blocked and you cannot see. You have to pull up all the way actually to the street, and your front end's a little bit into street. And most of the ones that the city maintained were all taken care of, no problem, but well, Calvin and I were talking, we were talking about how people's property comes so close to the sidewalks that they have their right to grow something, and I was supposed to get a hold of Jack today, but got too busy at work. But I'm just wondering if we can look into something. I mean, I do want to see what the code says about that exactly, as far as personal property and growing that close to the sidewalk and blocking the view, but I mean, I'm just wondering if we can talk about this at some time and get someone in here to figure out what we can do, because I realize it's private property, but it's also a danger to pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and everything all involved. And I'm wondering if we can, what can we do about this? Can we,
The list that Calvin wrote down that y'all looked at today has already been given to code enforcement for the
Right.
contact property owner. So, there's not really any further action you guys need to take. We'll take it from there.
right, oh no, I understand that, but even with talking with Kelvin, he was stating that, Jack will come back and say there's nothing you can do.
No, well, I would, all due respect to my employee Calvin, that's not what the code says.
Oh, no, well, I said certain ones,
Yeah,
okay.
We'll take care of it.
Okay, appreciate it, thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Anything else, Phil?
No.
Other fellows?
Happy New Year, everyone. Don't go north. I just got back from Indiana, 12 below zero. I had to drive an older brother down. I'll never do that again. I hope he learns to drive. Anyway, aside from that, speaking of driving, one thing that's a pet peeve, I got to bring it up again, golf carts. 3 different occasions driving down Golf Boulevard, I saw people driving golf carts on the sidewalk. Now, it may have just been for a short while, but either way, it's not the law, and that's what they're supposed to do. Obviously, they were lucky enough that a police cruiser didn't go by and see it. Aside from that, back in the hood, I saw a couple of times where children are, again, riding in golf carts and not restrained. So, let the record reflect, I've asked again that we start cracking down on these things, or we're going to be doing some paperwork and somebody's going to get hurt. It's not right. Thank you.
Phil, may I address that? In the existing golf course ordinance, there's nothing that requires a child to be restrained.
Okay.
In the existing golf cart ordinance y'all passed, they're required to have the little side handle.
Right.
But that's it. There's no requirement for them to be restrained.
Well, maybe we should look at that and maybe, amend that in some way. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay?
Okay, when there's a noise ordinance complaint, do you get a list of all of the houses that are the subject of the complaint from the sheriff's office?
We get information about the complainant and the parties involved.
So you get the address to which
Yeah.
the complaint, I'd
Yeah.
like to track those, and when we get to the working session about the short-term rentals, I'd like to collaborate a little bit on how we can keep track of those instances where there's a noise complaint made, even if there's not an active noise at the time the deputies arrive. And I think our ordinance could reflect problem properties, and perhaps we can envision some way to address that more systematically. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to thank everybody who participated in the Holiday Lighted Boat Parade, all the boat captains and the folks on those boats, and all the staff members who helped put it together. They did a great job, and also especially Eddie B., who was in the lead boat, I think for his second or third year. He's done that. So I appreciate everything everybody did, and it was a beautiful night. It was unseasonably warm. It was very nice for all the people who had the boat parade parties and whatnot. I was wondering if, Greg, you could very briefly remind us how the proceeds from the sale of the sewer system were generally applied around the city, because I believe it was almost entirely infrastructure projects that we.
Yeah, in fact, I'm gonna defer to our finance director, and he'll be happy to explain that for about the time again.
Sure. Being as it's about to come up on the ballot to clean up the last remaining elements in the reserve.
And also, Mayor, but if I may, while he's clarifying the allocation of the sewer fund monies, I also would ask him to take a couple minutes and remind the commission and the public about our reserve fund policy. So there may be a misconception about reserves that we have.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, the sewer was technically sold in October of 2014 officially, so fiscal 15, and that was the first fiscal year that it was brought to the commission recommendations as part of the proposed budget as to what to do with our own reserves that we had from the time we operated the sewer, and then also the funds received from the county for the sale, in total of about, just over $4 million is what that came up to. During the course of 2015, then 2016, and then 17, and now the current operating budget where the remaining $100,000 that's restricted by charter, along with the balance of like 401,000, that last 501,000. It's all been, if it was moved into the general fund, it was ultimately then transferred in the subsequent year into the capital projects fund. You know, of course, only a couple million of it's been spent at this point. It's been spent on road milling and resurfacing. It's been spent on stormwater projects. It's been spent on park improvements, rubberized surfacing underneath the playgrounds. It's, you know, the improvement of the ball field. You know, there's, you know, basically we look at our capital projects list, and you know, remember our capital projects fund, short of penny for Pinellas dollars in the neighborhood of $450,000 to $500,000 a year, is only, the only other revenue source that comes in there is grant money. So the discussion, along with the recommendation of the transfer and the review and approval, also denoted the desire to continue to not have a utility tax in the city, which is traditionally used in other places to pay for things like roadway improvements, resurfacing and curbing, and also to continue to not have a stormwater fee and be one of the few cities in the county that has neither one of those taxes levied on its residents. So again, all money from the sale of the sewer that we had and we got from the county has ultimately made its way into your capital projects funds to support capital projects that there realistically was no fund balance in capital projects to pay for, or very little at that point. You know, and again, short of maintaining services, you know, that are in the general fund, the second most important thing, or right next to it, is, you know, the maintenance of the city's infrastructure and, you know, capital, you know, things that we have. In terms of fund balance, you know, that certainly became a key part of the discussion and review, and was weighed into the recommendation and the proposed budgets throughout those years, because, you know, unlike years past, with a healthier economy and prudent financial policy and management, the city has been able to maintain, you know, somewhere between, you know, 50 and 100% fund balance in its general fund operating. And we've had several meetings and some workshops, and we look at that each year with a proposed operating budget as to, you know, not maintain too much. You know, that's difficult. We've had those discussions. How much is the right number? You know, we certainly don't want to have no reserves, but we don't want to have too much reserves, you know, sitting in the bank. And, you know, at the end of our last audited period, which we're going back about 15 months, and we're currently in our audit for the year ending September 30th, you know, we're still operating in that, you know, high 60 to 70% fund reserve balance in the general fund. So I think that answers what the manager wanted to discuss, how much we have in the bank. You know, we've got roughly, you know, 9 months or eight months worth of reserves to accommodate, you know, worst case scenario conditions for paying the bills if the money stops coming in. And, you know, with that, you know, we've used the sewer monies for infrastructure, you know, literally asphalt on the streets, storm drains underneath the ground, and, you know, to either improve or replace, you know, old areas within our parks. I hope that kind of hit what the mayor and the manager asked.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that emphasis on the conscientious application of the sewer fund proceeds to infrastructure upkeep in our city, which is one of our highest priority tasks, is to keep our city running and in good shape, and our streets and parks and everything else, and that's where largely the money went.
That's correct.
Yeah, if I might add, we found a new product that we're using for the resurfacing that is lasts double the amount of time. Can you elaborate on that? Greg?
Well, basically what we're doing is traditionally, most cities will mill a couple inches off the top of the street and then put asphalt down. And that looks good for a short period of time, but we're in a coastal area, and literally you can ride around and look at different parts of the city where we lost the crown of the road. So what we're doing is we're taking the road back, all the way back to the dirt or the sand, and putting in all new curbs, a new base, and then we're paving on top of that. And instead of getting, a couple of years worth of, well, it looks pretty good, we're gonna get 10, 15 years. Each street's different, depending on weather and rain, that dictates that. But, we're basically rebuilding old infrastructure, just like when the commission agreed to sell the sewer system. It was very old, and we were about to be on the hook for millions of dollars worth of work. And the county, of course, knew that, they bought the system. So, my commitment to the commission when I was hired, working with the commission, whether it's the BP money, the sewer money, is to make sure that we're putting a large amount of our capital money, not the general fund, but back in capital projects. Because we can all ride through, I'm not speaking negatively about any town, any city, but we can all ride through local cities where they've not kept up with street work or drainage work, and it needs to be commended. We're just finishing up 2 drainage projects that were in the budget now. So the point being is, you need to keep up with your infrastructure, because it pays you off in the future, and that's what we're doing. And by taking the sewer monies, particularly allocating those not to general fund items, but to capital projects, the entire population of Indian Rocks Beach and our guests, our seasonal guests, everybody benefits from that. So, I appreciate the commission working with us. All of the budgets I've been involved in since I've been here have been approved unanimously. And I think the large number of streets that we've already rebuilt, and we'll continue that. Unfortunately, the penny for Pinellas was approved. I can say that now that the vote's over with. We'll keep that up, but it's the right thing to do, and the commission made the right decision to do that, including this year where you allocated some additional money towards capital projects.
Thank you. Bill?
One other thing along with that, when Greg mentioned about milling all the way down, the way I looked at this thing was that we were going to redo these roads, but we're doing them at today's cost of labor and today's cost of materials, not 5 years from now, because they would obviously go up. So it was actually a savings as well in that regard.
Thank you. A couple other items I want to mention. First is Bob Griffin's, I won't say Bob Griffin's, but Bob Griffin spearheaded the Christmas card program several years ago around the city. And the city commission as a whole and individually has received a fair amount of commentary in the last month of all different sorts about the Christmas card program. And I was wondering if I could get a consensus for the city administration, Greg, to get together with Bob over the next few weeks or months to perhaps tweak certain elements of that program. There may be ways to alleviate some concerns that we've heard around the city of one sort or another. I think it's a worthy program, but I do think there may be some tweaks and modifications that could be useful. Is it okay for administration to undergo that? Okay, appreciate that. And the one other thing that I want to mention is I was going through some boxes of my old papers, and I have all kinds of, I save all kinds of old news articles and things that have to do with the city and whatnot. And I found an article that dated back to November of 1990. It had to do with the beginning of the beach renourishment project for Sand Key, which goes essentially from Sand Key all the way down through the Reddingtons, except for Bel Air Shore. And so this major project, and that we're sort of in the middle of, it's technically it would be a 50-year project. Is that right, Dean? 50 years is the extension of it. Before that, we had some minor renourishments back in like the 1970s, but nothing on the scale of what they embarked on in 1990 and 91. And the title of this article that was in the Tampa Tribune is "State to Sow Its Oats in Erosion Battle." And I wanted
to quote some elements of this because I thought it was so striking, especially thinking about the difficulties we may be facing in the future as far as beach renourishment. It says, for the first time, state officials want to spend more money to keep sand on Florida's beaches than to replace it after it is washed away. The idea is to stop erosion before it gets so bad that expensive renourishment is necessary. One way the state will do that is by planting more sea oats and building more dunes to anchor sand in place to protect beaches during storms. So coastal experts say the new approach makes sense. When someone is cut and bleeding, the first thing you do is stop the bleeding. The second thing you do is give them a transfusion. And then it goes on to say that the new emphasis on erosion prevention likely means fewer beach renourishments on Florida's horizon. And then it says, the new trend in beach management does not represent a dramatic change of public policy. According to Robert Dean, who is the coastal engineer from the University of Florida, who's passed away a few years ago. He did say, rather, it's the next logical step now that most of Florida's most severely eroded beaches have been renourished. In the past, we had a lot of repairs ahead of us, and we were basically playing catch-up. And so, essentially, the tail end of the article says that nearly $4 million is being sought to rebuild dunes, plant sea oats, and construct walkovers to keep people from trampling dunes. Among the communities in line for those projects are Indian Rocks Beach, Nassau County, Daytona Shores, and Venice. So way back when they embarked on this major series of nourishment projects, the whole intent was to put the sand in place and then to plant the bejesus out of it with sea oats and other native vegetation to, as much as possible, keep it in place, and also to build the dunes up so there were reservoirs of sand so that the beaches could re-nourish themselves as much as possible. And in those 27 years since this article was written, there's been quite a bit of dune establishment and sea oats and native vegetation establishment up and down the beaches from Sankey all the way down to the Reddingtons. And I think in Indian Rocks Beach particularly, it's been largely successful, the building up of the dunes up and down the beaches, because our beach is actually doing really well on the whole. If you go out there right now, whether it's high tide or low tide, it's remarkable how wide the beach is in general, and how much sand is built up into the dunes, and how much the dunes have contributed when the waves come up in storms and carry some of the sand out to the sandbar, and it comes back and eventually blows up into the dunes, and the cycle continues. The only part of Indian Rocks Beach that's really hasn't been able to sustain itself very well is the north end, and that's because Bel Air Shore has not participated in any of the beach renourishment projects, and the sand gets sucked away from the north end of Indian Rocks Beach into Bel Air Shore, and from the south end of Bel Air Beach in the Indian Shore. So much so that if you walk up there now, it's remarkable that you can hardly tell where Bel Air Shore starts and Indian Rocks or Bel Air Beach ends, because their beach is kind of widened out to some extent with the sand that's been contributed from the north and the south. But unfortunately, when you get to the northern 4 or 5 blocks of Indian Rocks Beach, it's really hurting up there because of the sand washing away, and there hasn't been enough stabilization. There's also down at the south end, around Central Avenue, it's kind of hurting in that neck of the woods too. But for the most part, the vast majority of our beach is in pretty amazing condition, and that's largely because of the dune system that's been built up. But even after all these years, we still have people who are resistant to the notion of vegetation out there, as if it was some kind of alien element that didn't have anything to do with this project in the first place, when in fact it was a major portion of this project and done to try to keep it in place so that funds were not used endlessly to just throw sand out there and then wash away, blow away, or disappear without anchoring it in place. And there's a possibility that in the long run that we're not going to see the number of renourishments or the extent of the renourishments in the past, but we have to do as much as possible, I believe, to help ourselves to protect our beach in case those go away, those renourishments go away or are spread out or minimized in the long run. And the main way to do that, the only way to do that, the natural way to do that, is to maintain our dune system and make certain it's continuous. continuous as possible and as extensively built up as possible, because the best thing we can do is help us help ourselves, not always be asking for help from outside and state or federal funds from elsewhere. So just wanted to point that out. I thought that was amazing, going back 27 years, when I think the vast majority of the people in this room may not have even been here 27 years ago. So, but I remember, I was there back at the beginning. And I have to, by the way, there's people, not just myself, everybody in this room probably knows that I've been involved with plantings out there for many years, but there are quite a few property owners and many, many volunteers who participated in volunteer planting projects over the years. And I have to thank all of them and the city staff for the work they've done on the dune system and maintaining and protecting our beach all those years. So, and that's it for me on that. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is additions and deletions. Are there any additions and deletions to the agenda?
No, sir.
Okay, then let's move on to the consent agenda. Randy?
Consent agenda, there are 2 items on this evening's consent agenda. Item A, approval of the December 12, 2017 regular city commission meeting minutes. Item B, approval of the 2018 city calendar of events. These are all the items on the consent agenda for this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. On to the next agenda item, 6A, ordinance number 2017-08. This is a public hearing and second and final reading on ordinance number 2017-08. Randy?
City of Indian Rocks Beach, ordinance number 2017-08. An ordinance of the City of Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, providing for amendments to the Code of Ordinances by amending Chapter 110, Zoning, Article 1, in general, Section 110-1 Definitions, Article 3, District Designation and Regulations, Division 1, generally, Section 110-131, Establishment of Zoning Districts, Article 4, Supplementary District Regulations, Division 8, Off-Street Parking and Loading Facilities, Section 110-372, Required number of parking spaces, parking for compact cars, providing for definitions of craft microbrewery, winery, or distillery, establishing an allowable zoning district, and parking standards for such use, providing for enforceability of existing land development regulations, providing for repeal of ordinances or part of ordinances in conflict herewith to the extent of such conflict, providing for severability, providing for renumbering, and providing for an effective date. This has been a second and final reading of ordinance number 2017-08.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open the public hearing and
I guess I can take lead. This has come to you in a few forms. Namely, it started with workshopping and going through the subordinate boards within the city. And this is really just to change your code because it does not specifically provide for microbreweries, distilleries, or wineries as a permitted use in any of your zoning districts. If a use is not permitted, it is not explicitly permitted, it is therefore prohibited. And so there's been some interest in the marketplace to bring this trend to Indian Rocks Beach, and that would be altogether an impossibility without these amendments. And so this is done to change the groundwork so that's at least a possibility, not necessarily an eventuality, but a possibility now as it would become a permitted use. This is pretty much coextensive with how restaurants and bars are treated in your code otherwise. It's just adding them into that group. I can answer any questions you have, or city staff can add to this.
thank you. Any questions up here? Okay, all right, then, is there any member of the public who would like to speak on this particular topic? So please come forward. Or not. Fairly non-controversial topic. Okay, then I am going to close the public hearing and look for a motion.
I move to approve ordinance number 2017-08 on second and final reading.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion on the motion?
I think it's really exciting and can add to the attractiveness of our tourism and commerce in the city.
Thank you. Bill?
Just that Pinellas County is one of the #1 counties in the state of Florida. So I'm gladly going into the great deal. Right?
Thank you. Down here.
I think I told you that at Fort Pinellas, they told us 11 had opened in the last 2017 in Pinellas County, so I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, there was a great article in the Times just a few days ago that went extensively into the microbrewery industry around Pinellas County and the Tampa Bay area. And so I think it's just high time that we kind of got on board and tweaked our zoning and to make it possible for that type of business here. I mean, just adds variety to be available to the folks that live here and to our visitors. So I am heartily for this, a favor of this. So that being said, Deanne, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Kennedy,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanna,
Yes.
Commissioner Lovell,
Yes.
Commissioner Hufnagel,
Yes.
Mayor Johnson.
Yes, and that is unanimous. On to agenda item 8, which is discussion of short-term rentals. Andy?
First and foremost, I'd like to thank all the members of the public who I'm sure came for the FDOT presentation and stayed for this. A few issues to talk about here. I think it's important as we discuss short-term rentals to have context. What we're discussing tonight, first and foremost, is a revised version of an ordinance we brought before you. This is not first reading or second reading. This is working through the process. I've been working with your city manager, bringing things before this body to get your input, and that's what we're doing again based on the input you've given us last time. We've made some changes, seeking additional direction before we can move forward. To that end, let's contextualize what we're talking about from a legislative standpoint. From a legislative standpoint, this city is prohibited from regulating the duration or frequency of short-term rentals. Full stop. That's where we have to start from. We can regulate other aspects of short-term rentals, but we cannot regulate duration or frequency. That's the lay of the land at this point. There's been other cities have taken various approaches to what other aspects of this kind of use they would regulate. Some have been met with litigation, some have succeeded, some have not in that litigation over what they've done. In the last meeting, I somewhat colloquially joked about bringing you Coke Zero, Diet Coke, and Full Coke, and brand names aside, there are different ways that we can approach this. What we've brought before you is a light or lean version of regulation, and the regulation primarily takes the form of sign up with the state, pay your taxes, let us know you exist, and we reserve the right to inspect to make sure you're abiding by all applicable codes. That's really the summary of what's been done here. Now, that's from the legislative context. I think it's important to also understand the commercial context because that contextualizes what's being done at a level high above you. At the end of 2017, in the last month, Airbnb reported that 400,000 hosts in the state of Florida made an estimated $450 million, hosting an estimated 2.7 million guests. For Airbnb, which is just one of the platforms, that was a 75% increase over the past year. The top 5 counties for Airbnb use, and again, understand there are other platforms. The top five counties were Miami-Dade, Osceola, Broward, Orange, and Pinellas. Pinellas sits at number 5 with an estimated $24.5 million in revenue for 140,200 guests. This is an issue in the marketplace. It's motivating tourism. It's moving tourism. In fact, in the last month, in addition to those numbers, in the last month, Airbnb, a California company, announced that they have taken on a $200 million cash infusion to start constructing Airbnb-branded hotels that they would build from the ground up, designed, well, not hotels, but structures designed for home sharing, with home sharing in mind. And one of the first places they're going to build one is in Kissimmee, Florida. It's across the country in different places, but it's not in the too distant region from us. That's not to say that they're just starting out west and going to make their way over time. This is a real issue. There are a lot of interested shareholders here. When we talk about this changing, the change needs to come at the biggest change, to the extent that the here and present concern is, I don't want this use by me. We can't change that. We being the body that I sit next to, cannot change whether or not the use is permitted altogether. We can regulate aspects of that use, but not duration or frequency. When we talk about the legislature and we say, well, the change needs to happen there, they're getting pressures from companies that are taking on $200 billion cash infusions to make substantial investments in the region. They're getting pressures from homeowners who have used this as a way to supplement or otherwise primarily source their income. So it is not as simple as doesn't everybody just see that this is a commercial use in my neighborhood? There are competing interests here and competing narratives. One of the narratives is, this is America, my private property rights, leave me alone, I'll do with my house as I please. The other interest is, I have to live next to that, can you believe what I deal with? And nobody up here is ignorant of those competing interests. At this point, your commissioners live it, they hear it from you, they hear it from city staff. I have my job of educating them on the legal restrictions and limitations, but this issue is not one that's approached from a point of ignorance. So please understand the sensitivities there. As we talk about what's being done at the legislative level, the legislative session just started this week. There are already 3 bills filed on short-term rentals, regulating vacation rentals. And I'll give you the numbers for those of you interested in tracking them. Senate Bill 1400 is a total preemption. It says local communities can't regulate short-term rentals. Even those that had something on the books before 2011, which there's this magic date out there, if you had it up before 2011 and never touched it since, we'll let you keep it. Even those would fall away. The only regulation would be that they have to register with the Department of Business and Public Regulation, DBPR, which we have as part of the ordinance we're proposing before this body. And it also preempts municipalities' abilities to inspect simply on the basis of something being the short-term rental. So even if we passed something tomorrow that did some of these things, it's possible that the legislature could change it and say, too bad, so sad. Even if you've passed it in the last 3 years, you lose. Game over, man, to draw from an 80s movie. Anyways, there's another proposed statute, House Bill 773. In reading the summary, it's my understanding this prevents municipalities from having a specific short-term rental ordinance. That's what we are trying to do here today. You would only be able to regulate residences as residences. Whatever you do in one zone or one kind of use of a home, you have to do for all. This also would let you keep 2011 regulations, change them as long as you're making them less restrictive. But it's still functionally total preemption as we're concerned about it today. The last one that I've seen so far is House Bill, I believe it's 789. And this is just implementing a certificate posting that says this is the registered owner, this is how to contact them. And that's also a part of what we're trying to do here today. That particular proposed statute, does not have a preemption component to it yet. These things can change as late as voting time, as I've seen in some cases. So this is the very start of session. We'll see what goes through committee and what happens, but again, everything we do is against this backdrop. The city only controls its destiny so far. So with that, we had a work session in the fall. I sat here and took what I consider to be copious notes of what you folks said, and tried to memorialize that into edits. The edits are limited because where we were working from was really a stage one. I don't think that there was really true consensus on a lot of issues. There was people saying, well, what about this? And well, what about that? Well, if that wasn't, let's do this. This is an attempt to show you, well, what we could divine from what you said, what we've changed, and saying again, do you like what you see, and what can we do here? What more would you like to see done, or what would you like us to do less of in the draft? So for the benefit of the public, on Friday, I directly emailed a draft to the commission of the limited revisions, and they are limited. The core revisions are summarized thusly. We've revised sections 110-840, 110-841 to clarify that the restrictions only apply to structures in the S, RM2, and RM1 districts. Previously, there was language about whether it was duplex or triplex, and people were getting really mired down in, well, those don't even exist in that district. So to eliminate any of that confusion, it applies to all structures in those zoning districts. And it amended whatever provisions needed to be amended to clean that up. We've enhanced the requirements of the posted sign in 110-844, namely, there's something that people joke about on the internet called malicious compliance, where you do exactly what you're told and nothing else. And so we had a requirement that there be a posted sign. What we added was the color, the font size, that it has to be in Times New Roman and not wingdings, and things like that, and also to make sure it aligns with some of the other changes we're doing with the sign code. And then finally, one of the other revisions we made based on feedback we got was the responsibilities of the designated responsible party, and now what that means in this ordinance is the individual who should be accountable or responsive to issues as they are presented. The language was very obvious in the past that they had to be available, and we tried to hone in that language a little more. So those are the core changes. After I transmitted the ordinance to you, I did receive feedback from one commissioner that we did talk about changing the reporting requirements. There's a reporting requirement about reporting about leases, and not all of these systems operate on a lease, so broadening that language to capture rental agreements, leases, occupancy agreements, whatever terminology we'll take on. That was not in the draft. We've given you that as something that will be incorporated going forward. With that, that's a lot more than I typically like to talk at your meetings, so I'll let you do your business. We're here to, again, talk through what's been done, talk about what more you'd like to see from the perspective of myself and the city manager. If there are angles on which you think you can reach a consensus to give us direction, that would be most helpful, because the aspiration, or wouldn't it be nice, or I'd like to see is not necessarily clear. What you would like to see is what the body would like to see, and we want to make sure that we start moving in the direction of something actionable and not aspirational. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Randy. Now that we're duly depressed about the latest salvos from the state legislature,
You're welcome.
we can go forward with something that may or may not be in existence a year from now. Who would like to take this up? Start out, Ed?
Yes, there's two areas I'd like to get consensus that we should amend on the draft. The first has to do with the definition of the transient party, the transient lodging establishment. I would like consensus that we should ensure that a home in which a single room might be rented, but the whole house is not rented. In other words, sometimes that's called an owner-occupied establishment, or sometimes people rent out a spare bedroom, but they live there. I believe that the likelihood of the quality of life complaints, which is really what we're trying to control, these quality of life issues, I believe that the likelihood of that in an owner-occupied residence, where maybe just a room is rented out, is low. And so I was hoping that we would be able to exempt owner-occupied residences from the definition of a transient establishment.
Is there, I'm trying to rack my brain, is there anything that we're missing that, or Greg, that off the top of your head that would set off alarm bells? I mean, it's almost like a variation of a bed and breakfast where the owner lives there and whatnot. I mean, what do you think about that?
I'm pondering that.
Yeah, I can tell you from a legal standpoint, there are communities that have tried to make who have made that distinction in the way that they operate. That's not without precedent. The only issue is, and that's my job and working with your city managers, is making sure we bound it properly so that you have, if you have somebody, let's say, who's occupying a structure for which there are divisions, and they won't ever go into the other side of that structure, trying to reach those nuances, but this isn't without precedent. It's not uncommon.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make certain that we're not overlooking some potential problems.
I think what Randy just said makes a lot of sense. I think that's doable, and we looked at a lot of different ordinances across the state, different places, and we can easily, Randy, look at the wording and language of the cities that already have that in their ordinances and incorporate that in there.
Cookie, did you have something?
I was going to, one of the things that the legislature in their wisdom said was that there's only a certain amount of things that we can do. And if we do more than that, and they feel that we are regulating to an extreme, then we can be sued for that, which is what Randy was explaining, that, is it Appalachia? Where is the big case that's going on right now?
As it relates to Florida, there was a very large case out of St. Augustine area,
Right.
St. Johns County, Flagler County. They had a
Flagler.
very, very robust ordinance. Their ordinance was ultimately held up with one minor element of it stricken because it was made to be retroactive. I think that's, to answer your question, it was Flagler County had
I agree.
the largest suit. There are other communities, Anna Maria Island, for example, where they've taken on a number of the ancillary aspects of short-term rentals and have been sued. And I want to make a distinction. When we say you can get sued, that's this like amorphous boogeyman. There's a few kinds of claims that the city remains subject to. One is that your ordinance is just void. Somebody will sue and say they've tried to enforce this against me. They can't do this. You already said they don't have the right anymore. That one isn't so bad because it's not as costly. It's about declaring the invalidity or validity of your ordinance. The other kind of ordinance, the other kind of suit, which can be more troubling and costly, is what I've referred to in the past as a Byrd-Harris Act claim. It's a statute passed in '95. Many people are familiar with the idea that if the government takes my property, it owes me money. If it takes my whole property, well, there's another statute out there that says if they do something less than a taking, but it inordinately burdens my existing use or vested private interest, a lot of technical terms that aren't even fully fleshed out in the statute, but then you can sue on that. And there have been beach communities up and down the Gulf Coast of Florida who have been met with those kinds of suits for trying things, saying, oh, you had the right to do it, but the way you did it, it burdened my property, and now pay up. And so they're not saying it's invalid, they're just saying I need to be compensated because you've changed the way my valid use of this property. So you run the risk of running into those kinds of suits, and maybe there's a creative plaintiff's bar attorney who will come up with something else I'm not referring to yet here. But as you look at those, one is more costly than the other. And that's why what we've proposed is not about creating a new bureaucracy. It's not about creating any real new burden. It's just sign up so we know where you are, and make it so that if there are problems, they can be addressed. That's really the overarching theme in what the city manager and I have attempted to craft for your review.
Yeah, correct.
That's okay. Good.
Well, it sounds like when we finally distill all this out, the safest thing or fallback that we have is our own regular ordinances for noise and parking and things like that that would apply, whether it's a short-term rental, long-term rental, or single-family home or whatever. So I'm going to kind of look down that road.
Well, as you talk about the issues you want to look to, I do want to remind you that Commissioner Hoofnagel has proposed one aspect of this, and before we get too far afield, I think...
Yeah, I'll get back to Ed.
Okay.
Why, if I may ask, what is your main basis for having that taken out of there? Just that you think that people are more responsible? that are
Yes,
doing that?
the purpose of this ordinance is to control the quality of life interruptions that happen in uncontrolled rentals that happen in a residential neighborhood. I do believe that the likelihood of that happening is low in the case where it's a homeowner who's living there full-time and they just happen to rent out a bedroom. I think it's a different, I don't think that's where the problems lie. I think they lie in the nice house in the residential neighborhood that gets rented out for the week and 100 people come and have a big party in the back. That's the problem. And we have to control that as best we can here, but I strongly agree with what Phil Hanna is saying. It's going to be addressed in our standard noise ordinances, and we have to come down like a ton of bricks on people that are violating those ordinances, like a ton of bricks. We don't have to have a special ordinance to enforce our noise and quality of life issues. We just have to know where the problems are by having proactive communication with the law enforcement, keep a record of it, and when it becomes a list of repeated problems, we have to go in there and enforce the existing codes. That doesn't require this ordinance. Although I support this ordinance, I'm just saying we're going to get this through our existing quality of life ordinances.
You know, and one of the other things is we want their names, we want a point of contact where they're in the area so that if we have to get in touch with them because of any of the issues, the parking, too many cars, noise, whatever the issue is in the neighborhood, that we want point of contact so that we have the opportunity to get in touch with these people and that they're near enough to be here, that or if they're not here, that they have someone in the area that we can contact and be in touch.
If I mean, I understand what you're saying, Ed, but I myself think that they should just be bulked all in together because, you know, you have someone renting out a room and you can't guarantee that that person renting out the room is a responsible, you know, citizen. I mean, in my eyes, because you never know who's going to buy a house and what they're going to do with it, with this law, with this availability. So I would be fine just leaving them under the transient occupants because, you know, what if they go away for a weekend while that person's staying at their house and it turns out to be an all-out party? So, I mean, it's a what if. It's a
That could
what
happen
if.
at anyone's house.
Yes,
I
yes.
just believe that the intention of this ordinance was more narrow than that. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I just would like it to be broad so it covers anything we can cover without being taken to court.
Well, and, you know, and addressing that, it's an unduly onerous burden for somebody who's just renting out a room here and there to comply with the things that, I mean, we're not coming up with a list that's all that extensive. There are some things, and there are obviously some additional duties, so to speak, that we're asking of people.
I just thought it was some additional overhead that I thought may not be necessary, but
Right.
it's
We can
up
kick
to
it
the
around.
commission to debate. I wanted
Yeah,
to propose.
we can see what else is out there and kick it around and think about it.
Yeah, I'm fine leaving it as it is as far as that one goes.
Phil?
I'm gonna side with Phil on that, only from the reason that if people can find a way to get around something, they're gonna find a way to get around it. And it's sort of one of those, well, yeah, we only rent it out, you know, only one bedroom. Maybe that's the truth, and sometimes they don't do it that way. So if what you're suggesting happens, and the people are gonna be there, be more responsible for their home, and probably won't have parties and things going on, I think it will take care of itself. What Phil was suggesting is if they do have to go out of town, or they're on a 3-month hiatus or something, somebody's only renting the one room, but nonetheless. So it's probably better to leave it in place and let it play out.
And it could be 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms, or they're gone for several weeks or
Right.
a month. I mean, there's so many different variations on it, and.
It's hard to play the what-if game, but I think that's what we're here tonight for.
Ed, you had more?
So there's no consensus on that one?
But I don't mind looking into what other cities have done, just to try to deal with it, but no consensus on it.
Thank you.
Okay, Ed, you had.
It was just the repeated noise violations. I'd like, and I don't know that it's going to be, I don't know that it needs to be in this ordinance, but maybe we can table that for a work session with our existing noise ordinance. But when the sheriff came and said that they're getting more and more disturbances, and the noise was not there by the time they arrived, and that they were primarily originating from the sheriff deputy said they were from Airbnb type stuff. That got me to think I'd like to make sure we're keeping track of that and enforcing our ordinances as rigorously as we do the bars and restaurants when they have repeated violations. And the fact that they've turned the music down by the time the sheriff gets there should not let the people
off the hook.
Something happened. They wouldn't have called the cops if they weren't here. Maybe we'll table that for a different discussion, but.
What my comment would be about that is that the way the law enforcement has to enforce noise violations is they have to have a witness to the issues. If they get there and the noise is turned off, unless the complainant wants to fill out, maybe use the wrong term, an affidavit or what, some kind of like a complaint form, there's nothing they can do. But saying that, the monthly report that y'all get that breaks out parking violations and traffic accidents, I can ask the sheriff's office to further break out so that it would be in a monthly report, those type of complaints, so you can see, you know, how many of those we're getting. We could just have that in the regular report.
And maybe on your C-Click fix, maybe you could have some kind of a posting there where someone could also post repeated violation. We shouldn't let this one slip, that's what I'm saying.
If I could just address the 2 points with that, I think the city manager's point is taken that it sounds like one of the aspects of your interest might be getting a registry or a list or running reports specific to that issue, and that's one aspect. But I would caution against moving in any direction where there is a consequence for a complaint and no evidence. One, because of parties' due process concerns. Two, because of susceptibility to abuse. If I don't like my neighbor, I can start making calls and say, well, you're a problem property. You had 10 complaints against you last month, didn't you? So just being mindful of the cascading effects of those things.
Understood, but we have to address our citizens' concerns.
Absolutely.
And we have to do something where we're controlling the quality of life disturbances, because people really don't care about the short-term rentals if they have to. They care when it interrupts their lifestyle. And so we have to be vigilant on that. We can't let that slide. And that this ordinance is a part of it, but it's also enforcing the ordinances that we have.
Understood. And let me address part of that comment. One of the things that we do on a regular basis is that even when we have issues where we don't have the ability to cite somebody for a violation, and that goes back to Captain Liner, I praised Captain Liner earlier in the meeting, is that one of the things that he and I agreed to that we do on a regular basis is that, in fact, Phil Robel was involved in a situation that we had where we technically didn't really cite anybody. We had some problems is that when we run into these repeat problem properties, even if somebody's not been cited, what we do on a regular basis is that we reach out, it's either staff, it's primarily to the sheriff's office, and it's done at a pretty high level, where we contact the property owner. We just recently dealt with this property, the property owner, I think it was in New York or somewhere, and make the property owner aware of whatever the particular problem is. This particular situation had to do with tenants and noise and some behavior that they had going on there. But we're very aggressive with that, and it's really surprising because particularly the out-of-town owners, they may not know what all is going on there. And our success rate on resolving those kind of issues has been, almost 100%. It's very high.
Thank you. Ed, do you have anything else? Okay. Who else has something specific that they're looking at, or that they're interested in tweaking, or unhappy with, or happy with, or cookie? Let me mention, Phil might have something when he gets back. We have the section on parking standards, and one of the things is that there's kind of a creeping sort of incrementalism aspect sometimes with the disturbances, where it's not a full-out party that's so much disturbing the neighborhood. It's sort of just the bulk of activity in general can be disturbing. In other words, there's more activity coming and going where you once had a quiet neighborhood, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of more cars and people coming and going and whatnot. It doesn't have to be a big bash that's being thrown that's disturbing. It can just be upsetting by the fact that there's just a lot of stuff going on, so to speak. And here for our parking standards, we talk about that there will be one off-street parking space for each bedroom. However, the number of cars parked in a short-term rental shall not exceed the paid parking services available at the property. Is that essentially aimed at the notion that you can't have extra cars parking on the grass and things of that nature, as opposed to parking on the street? But you can't really restrict street parking, right? Or can we?
Well, the administration can, and we do that on a regular basis. So we had, we dealt with the beach parking issue.
Well, right, by putting signs up.
Yeah, that's all we can do. I mean,
right.
Just because somebody has a vacation rental on us, there's parking restrictions. They can line the street up with cars, and that's legal.
Right.
But normally what happens though is if we have that where that's a repeated problem, there'll be enough complaints where we'll go out and look at it, and we may cordon off or on one side of the street do no parking, but it's on a case by case basis. But that's something you just touched on, which is a good point. And I think previous Commissioner Jim Labby came to a meeting not too long ago and brought this topic up. There's nothing in our code that prevents people from parking in their front yards or parking whatever they want to in their front yards. That's why we have, I call it a travel, like a 50-foot long
motorhome.
Motorhome. The guy's got parked all the way across his front yard at an angle that sticks out almost to the edge of the right of way. There's nothing that we have that stops that. So I think you maybe have touched on something that we need to look at a little closer, because where we say that they have the one parking space for each bedroom, and then it says, however, the number of cars parked in short-term rental shall not exceed the paid parking surfaces. There's really not anything we have that keeps them from parking in
except for a short-term rental here, it basically, it says that it could.
Yeah, that may be something that Randy needs to look at from a legal.
Right, well, if I may ask, I mean, I know people that have 3 cars and they have a single driveway, and there's not enough pavement, and they do park in the front yard. I mean, can this cause us problems, because they're gonna say, boy, your residents are, why can't we?
That's a possibility, I think, but there's nothing that limits your ability to regulate properties based on use, and usage for that is distinct.
Okay.
Yes, that's a possibility, and this is the parking standards is something that Greg and I will revisit in light of that, and see if we can either own it or need to make it part of a broader amendment where we amend another part of your code to address that, if that is a real concern. That may be something that has to be discussed out. But I can't tell you as a city that's not.
I hate for that to bleed over into people that are permanent residents and are, responsible residents, but they just rather not put their cars in the street. They put it on the front lawn. So,
It's just a particularly tricky aspect to try to corral, because when we have the beach access, the issue where people are spread over the parking to the east side of Gulf Boulevard, then we tended to go along the entire length or half of a block on one side or whatever, and put the sign. And the only other place that I can think of in town where we have sort of a similar situation is near the boat ramp here, where we have the sign that up and down within a half block or so. You can have parking for trailers and things like that. But if you say you had in the middle of a neighborhood, you had one troublesome short-term rental, it's kind of hard to just put a sign right in front of that one property. And next thing you know, they're parking in front of all the neighbors' properties, and next thing you know, you're putting signs up. I wish it was a magic bullet way to tackle it, but it's tricky. And I just heard today, I was at the grocery store, from the wife of a former commissioner who was just talking about that all of a sudden there's a short-term rental that has popped up behind their house, and sometimes it's fine, and then other times there's just people come and going, and cars are parked everywhere, and noise and stuff going on, and it's like, there it is. So there's so many different aspects of the problem, but the parking is one of the trickiest.
The parking is, when I was reading Randy's dissertation, it seemed the same thing, because I'm thinking if you do, where if you're a short-term rental owner, you can only have so many cars parked on the pavement, but the guy next door can have whatever he wants. That's selective enforcement, and that's like flags going up. So I don't know if that would be the right thing. So that's going to be an area to look at.
We'll revisit it, and it may be that it needs to fall away upon further discussion with the city manager.
Do the best that you can.
Yeah,
that is an important aspect of the issue. So, a little while you were away, we were just asking if any of their commissioners had something specific in here that they either wanted to change, had concerns about, or wanted to comment about, and the information is in front of us, so the proposed ordinance. So did you have anything?
Not really.
Else in
Not
here?
at this point.
Okay, so
if I may, just one thing, I know we spoke about this, but, I just think the owner should be I know we said they can pawn it off on a responsible party, but then that's still putting a buffer in between us, the police, everybody, and the owner, when it comes down to the problem. And I know what Greg was talking about, and I thank him for letting me sit in when they did that with Liner, and I know that can happen, but I mean, on a basis where the owner needs to be contacted for that weekend, I mean, there still has to be somewhere where there is that contact information.
One nuance I want to make clear, the designated responsible party is not the person who takes or is responsible for citations of violations. That still remains the owner. The designated responsible party is, as it's phrased in this ordinance, is there to be the person on the ground responding, because realistically speaking, I think we can all think of an example in this community where a short-term rental may be operated by an owner who is out of state. And then much of this community, putting the Airbnb and VRBO issue aside, has people who have owned these properties as second homes. And so if they're not here for a large chunk of the year, but now they're using it in this way, putting them as the person you're going to call does not, in our view, do anything to resolve the here and now issue anymore than having somebody who is designated to do that with that accountability.
But is there somewhere where we can have their information in the city where it has to be him as the registered person on file, where if the city needs that?
Yeah, one thing that I need to maybe clarify, great city attorney, actually the draft of the ordinance says that violations, a responsible party can be cited, and also the designated person that you're referring to, Phil, they also can be given notices. So the way this is drafted, a responsible party or the owner can be cited or noticed. So your concerns about, well, if we just have the responsible party, can we really do anything with it? Yeah, the responsible party that they designate is cited for the violation, the way this is written.
Well, I just would like that to be, I mean, can that be something that, I mean, would that cause problems if we say, because a lot of them will be registered as LLCs right now.
Well, the first tier of this ordinance is a requirement to register with the state in two different regards.
Right.
And then to register with us for purposes of the business tax receipt. To the extent it's an LLC, you still have Sunbiz that's going to tell you who
Right.
owns and operates the LLC or who the registered agent is. So yes, as a preliminary basis, we are capturing owner data. And yes, the city manager is correct that this makes it so that we can cite. The nuance I was trying to say was it doesn't mean that they are the exclusive person.
Okay.
An owner can still be cited. What we're trying to do is enhance our ability to enforce so that we're not having issues of citing owners in Cincinnati or Topeka on a given weekend, but having somebody on the ground who we can hold accountable as well. But we will, to answer your question, we will have the ability to contact or to have the information for the owner of record. Not the least of which is they're still going to be in the Pinellas County Tax Records Office.
Right, but
We
I
can
just.
find that out for any property in the state.
So we can basically, if they are a nuisance to us, we can be a nuisance to them.
I wouldn't phrase it that way, but
Okay,
we
I
can certainly
understand.
make an effort to contact them and work with them.
Okay.
Along with that, can you add and/or? So let's say somebody's a property manager, but they don't want to let the owner know that there's any issues because it might feed back that they're not doing a good job. But if either both were cited,
This is
it does say that?
This is the order.
It says or, and/or is honestly a redundancy that isn't really necessary.
I saw it on Law and Order the other night. I just wondered if it's- You get the idea.
Yes, I think the disjunctive allows us, or allows us to elect which option we need. We don't need the conjunctive of and as well.
I'm just gonna say, I trust that you're doing everything we can do without causing lawsuits, and I appreciate that.
To that point, only because you've said it twice, I want to make very clear, I can make zero guarantees.
Oh, no, I understand.
I just, for the benefit of all present, I've made this joke a few times, but, my sister is a physician, she's gone through malpractice training, and she calls me and she says, I didn't listen, what did they say? I don't understand what these lawyers speak says. The rules are this simple. Don't mess up. If you do mess up, don't hide it, and just because someone says you messed up, doesn't mean you messed up. There is a possibility that somebody's going to challenge what we do here, no matter how limited in scope it is. We will defend what we do, and we're making every effort to make it possible to say it's defensible in the light of the current landscape. There is also the possibility, which I've addressed, that we may do something that is perfectly fine today that will not be fine come July 1, 2018. And that's just the way this process works. So I just want to make it clear I have zero guarantees, but we are trying to minimize the probability.
Thank you.
And thank you for the reporting from the Department of Redundancy Department. Okay, anybody else up here have something specific they want to
Can I
add?
ask a
before
question, RB?
Yeah.
I know it's cold.
Yeah, Gene, we'll get you, I'm heading your direction.
Oh.
So, is there anything else up here before I head to the public? Okay, if anybody wants to comment on this topic, state your name and address.
I've been sitting too long. My name's Jean Scott. I live at 420 Harbor Drive South. I'm just curious, is anybody investigating to see if these people still claim their homestead on these properties?
We've talked about that, and what we intend to do is, let me just talk about the process for just a second. what I'm gonna recommend the commission tonight is after they finish their work tonight, this has gotta go to the planning commission where they have their own work sessions, and ultimately there'll be an ordinance drafted. Planning commission will have a public hearing, and it'll work its way back to the commission, and I say that just to say that there'll be plenty of other opportunities for the public, and whether you don't own a vacation rental or you do, to have input, but we made the decision not too long ago that there were different little random things that we could go out and enforce, having to deal with business licenses and the issue that you brought up. And what we intend to do is, once we have an ordinance on the books where officially people have to register and have to do the things that the commission and the city attorney has talked about, is as we get information from people that they're operating these businesses, it's going to be cross-reference or cross-check with the county to see whether people are filing homestead or not. Because obviously, if they're doing what they're doing, there's a problem with their homestead, that'll be all part of this. It'll all be wrapped up in our process of somebody registering with the city, is that we'll forward their information to the county, and the county will give us feedback about whether they file a homestead or not.
Because I know somebody that has rented their home for years,
Yeah.
and she was fined $100,000.
Yeah.
Whoa. So, and she claimed homestead. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Palomar, 102 15th Avenue. You're talking about problem properties right now?
We're talking about short-term rental ordinance. That's very specific.
Well, I heard
what we're talking
problem
about.
properties with that.
Yeah, no, but Jimmy,
Short-term and long-term.
well, this particular topic is short-term rental ordinance, not, we're not just generalizing.
Well, you're
Some of that's
bouncing
come in.
around, you're bouncing around all over, and now I'm up, and you don't want to let me talk about.
Well, if you have something about the short-term rental ordinance, please.
So I'm talking about, I don't know if it's short-term is what, a year or less?
Oh, much less. I mean, what we're talking about is people who generally rent out their houses for like a week or a weekend or something like that. That's usually what we.
I would think that you should be more concerned about, being that you opened up more liquor in the community, you should be worried about what you have in long-term rentals, especially in the business district, when they don't own the property. Because as I walk down my dark street today, after 4.5 years trying to get the light fixed that still doesn't work properly, and at 2:40 this afternoon, I was with Jack Womet, where he left, but I was with 2 police officers because urination across the street from my house in the middle of the day again happened. That I promised that I wouldn't say something tonight, but now that you're talking about rental properties with problems, I'm more concerned about rental properties that are being rented that have liquor licenses that you do nothing for. So I know you're worried about marijuana being sold across the street from my house, but nothing about the condition of the property across the street. Are we going to ever address this before you leave, or do you want to
Well, Jimmy,
just
like
forget about it?
Jimmy, like I just said, we're specifically workshopping
Okay,
short-term.
thank
I mean,
you.
you can work with the administration,
Thank
you
you.
can talk to the sheriff's deputies, there's plenty of avenues that you can have. I'm just saying that right now, and you know how this works, because you sat up here for many years, we're specifically addressing
Okay,
this topic.
thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Are you going to, but you had problems with 103, 105, 15th Avenue when it came to medical marijuana, and it's empty over there. What do you plan? You discussed that property. I wasn't at that meeting, but your concerns was worried about that. You were worried about that back then.
We did not discuss
All right,
any
so,
particular piece
You got
of
no problems with the property right now, then?
No, that's not the topic, that's up for
Okay.
discussion,
All right.
Jimmy.
Thank
I'm
you.
just saying.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the lights still don't work.
So, just, if I know this has been going on, I've been trying to follow it. but-
Yeah, the name and
Oh,
address.
Oh, John House, 21 Corby Trail. So, like, we have hotels and B&Bs that spend a lot of money in the name of safety for their the people that rent. So, Randy, what you said was, we can't even require the Airbnbs to protect the people that rent there, because if we did say, oh, you gotta have a fire extinguisher, you gotta have a smoke detector in every room like we do with motels and all that, you can't even tell them to do that, because you would have to tell the neighbor to do that that's not even doing an Airbnb?
No, I did not say that.
Okay, well, okay, wait, no, one of the bills was saying that, if you did that with the, one of the bills was saying if you treated that was at 773, I think whatever you did to that house, you had to do to the next door neighbor house, even if they didn't have a baby, right? That was what that bill was gonna say. But
Yes, there is a proposed statute
right,
that is not on the books yet.
right. But
That
that's,
something-
so right now, can the city regulate the rooms that are let out in Airbnbs, just like we regulate motels and B&Bs legitimately? And then when Bill Hill's down there, I mean, he had to follow all the, safety regulations. Can it be approached from a safety regulation that they have to comply along those lines?
Yes, and there are aspects of that in the current draft of the ordinance.
Okay, well, I did not.
Aspects of it.
Aspect of it, okay. Can we get a copy of that? Is it online anywhere?
Yeah, it's a public record, yeah.
It's online with the agenda, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't see that this, the little,
What about yours?
okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak at this time?
Bill Thomas, 470 20th Avenue. I just want to make sure that when you're talking about the houses that are being rented, that the exemption saying in your applicability saying that this section shall not apply to any facilities that are occupied on a full-time basis by the owner as an on-premises permanent resident. So all these discussions have been based on, full houses being rented or anything that where the resident is not in that dwelling, correct?
Largely so, yes.
Okay. Well, this exemption here, I was just trying to find out, because I was confused on whether if you rented it more than 6 months, then it becomes a transient place, and does that change does that change the class, the applicability of this regulation?
As it's phrased, a transient public lodging establishment is defined as a structure which is rented to guests more than 3 times in a calendar year for periods of less than 30 days or more, or 1 calendar month, whichever is less, or which is advertised or held out to the public as a place rented to guests within these districts. That's the definition as it reads there.
Okay, and
As it relates to the exception for owner occupied, that was a proposal by Commissioner Nagel that this body decided it did not want to move forward with.
okay, so we still have this language in there then, correct? I'm looking at the draft that was out there that does the exemption for the owner occupied residence. So that's still in the new draft then, correct?
I'm not familiar with the exception you're referring to.
Well, I'm sorry, it's at the bottom of 110-840 applicability, the last sentence in the first paragraph.
No, that is not in the current draft. The current draft reads that the section shall apply to all structures used for the purpose of short-term vacation rentals as permissible commercial businesses when operating within the listed districts, full stop.
Okay, so this was taken out then?
Correct, that was a moment
Okay,
mistake.
so when you're discussing the things that Phil and Ed were discussing, it includes the Airbnbs and the residents owner that occupy the homes and everything. There's no exception for that then, correct?
That's what we were talking about.
That's what this is all about.
Okay. And one other thing, the home care, if you need home care, does this applicable to home care where you have a live-in nurse instead of going to a retirement home? Because more and more, this is gonna be an issue. Because I know my long-term care insurance, I looked up the way it's designed, is only to pay on a monthly basis. So that would be classified as a short-term rental, I would assume.
How long are you gonna be there?
Well, aren't you paying them to be there and they're not paying you to be there?
Yeah.
I'm renting the room out to them, so if I need full-time care.
But you're paying them to be there still.
Yeah, you're not renting it to them, you're paying them.
I'm sorry,
Well, no, I would rent, well, I don't know what the insurance covers, but, if I'm letting them stay there, then I should get a reduced rate and, what I'm,
Right. The answer your question, the answer is no. What you're talking about, it's not covered by.
So this was taken out?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to comment on this ordinance?
I'm sorry.
Proposed ordinance at this time? Okay, not seeing anybody. Moving forward, Greg, you're talking about taking our discussion to the PG board?
This is an element of the land development code, and per the ordinances that we have, the processes we follow is that we now send this document with some little additional research that Randy and I would do. It would go to the planning commission, and they would have their own work sessions, and then once they're comfortable with their versions, we draft an ordinance working with the clerk and the city attorney, and then on top of their work session, the planning commission would have a public hearing, and at some point down the road, it would come back to y'all, and it would be in an ordinance form, and you'd have an additional public meeting, so that would be the process.
For the benefit of the public, this is already roughly in an ordinance form. Some of the formalities of the structure are lacking, whereas clauses, things that set forth why the city's doing what it does, which part of that is drawn from these discussions, which is why it's not been incorporated yet, the justifications, but just so you know, they're not seeing this as just a couple bullet points. This is already starting to take the form of an ordinance. It will be a more final form as it comes back to them in the future.
And one other comment would be, based on the comments we've received tonight and what the city attorney just said, take us a few days, but once we have the updated draft, we'll post that on the website, and that'll be kind of a working document. Of course, the planning commission can recommend some additional changes to it, but within a few days, we'll do our best to get the most current draft of this on the website where the public can see it.
I got a quick question.
Go ahead.
Can you answer something for me? Gene had brought up about homestead, and I know you're only allowed to have one homestead, but a lot of the people that are buying these properties that are going to be short-term rentals are investors. So how does the homestead affect? Did I miss something in that? Because it's
people breaking the law.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, I heard homestead, and I'm not following that, so.
And I think we all know, we're speaking the same language, but basically, if you are occupying, if you're conducting these type businesses on a property that you own, and you're filing a homestead, you're in violation of the law. And the county's gonna come after you, and as Gene indicated, there's been numerous cases, and I've heard that number, they'll go back, I don't know legally how far they can go back, but I've heard numbers as high as $100,000 will fine you for doing that, because you're breaking the law when you do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, just for everyone here, once you have, you have to have the safety requirements, the parking requirements, fire requirements. We have an inspection. If you violate those, then one of the stipulations is that we have the right to do inspections on the property, and you have to adhere to that, we will do that. And it's part of the ordinance that someone who has a vacation rental will receive, up front. So I wanted to bring up the inspections because we didn't even mention those tonight, but just so that all of you are aware of it.
For this body's benefit, at our last meeting, there was some discussion about the inspections, dividing from what you've said. We heard you want the inspections, keep them permissive, not mandatory.
Right.
And that's what we've done in the current trend.
If I may ask one more question, I guess it's my fault that I didn't realize that this was tonight, because I know there was supposed to be a workshop on something else that was canceled.
For next month.
And that was, and I thought we were going to have like a 4 to 6 workshop on this again after he came back with it. So we're not gonna do that at all, and it's just gonna go from here to planning and zoning then.
Yeah, but I would emphasize, that process will involve multiple public meetings.
Okay.
I expect, just like this commission's done, the planning commission probably have at a minimum a couple of work sessions.
Right.
And then there'll be an advertised ordinance, and there'll be another meeting, and it'll come to you as an ordinance. So there's probably at least 4 to 5 public meetings that people, you know, if they show up, can put their comments in.
Right.
Okay. Any more discussion up here on this? All right, then I guess we'll be seeing this again and again in various forms until we hammer it out, and hopefully we won't get too many roadblocks thrown in front of us from our fans up there in the state legislature, and I say fans very guardedly, because they have not been making life easy for us as far as taking care of our own business, unfortunately. Okay, is there any other business to come before us at this time? Not seeing any, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. This meeting's adjourned. Appreciate it, everybody. See you next time. For the last time.